Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today, we're diving into a spine-tingling story that will leave you questioning what really lurks in the shadows. This is The Curse of the Lonely Boy, a haunting tale of family traditions, forgotten graves, and the chilling consequences of curiosity. They say the past never truly stays buried, and sometimes the restless dead are closer than you think. So, grab your blanket, dim the lights, and get ready as we unravel the mystery of Billy Carter, the boy who wandered too far into the woods, and the sinister presence that followed him back. Let's begin. Curse of the Lonely Boy. They say children should never accompany their parents to the mountains for ancestral rituals, especially not near the old cemeteries. Strange things can happen there, and sometimes the dead aren't as restful as they seem. This tale begins with little Billy Carter, who joined his parents on a trip to the rural countryside to honor their ancestors. The Carters, like many families with roots in small-town America, believed in maintaining old traditions. It was spring, the air thick with the scent of pine, as they approached the family burial ground perched atop Wildwood Hill. "Stay by the car, Billy," his mom warned. "Your dad and I will take care of things. You're too young to be wandering near graves." Billy crossed his arms. "I'm almost 10. That's not a kid anymore. Besides, I'm not scared. Nothing out there can scare me. Not even ghosts." His dad chuckled. "All right, but stay close to us. And don't touch anything." The cemetery was an overgrown plot of land behind a rusting iron gate. The Carters worked diligently to clean the grave of Billy's grandmother, removing weeds and replacing the weathered flowers. His dad even placed a small stone at the head of the grave, a tradition meant to show respect and promise a lasting legacy. But Billy soon grew bored. While his parents muttered prayers and fussed over the grave, he wandered off, his sneakers crunching on the dried leaves scattered among the tombstones. That's when he heard it. "Billy." A soft, eerie voice whispered his name. His head snapped up, his heart racing. The sound had come from the woods just beyond the cemetery. Through the trees, he spotted a boy about his age peeking out from behind a gnarled oak, a crooked smile on his face. Billy's curiosity got the better of him. He approached cautiously, but the boy darted deeper into the woods. He laughed, a hollow, echoing sound that sent a shiver down Billy's spine. The shadow in the forest. "Hey, wait!" Billy called, following the boy. His steps quickened as the figure disappeared deeper into the shadows. Every time he thought he'd catch up, the boy would vanish and reappear farther ahead, as if daring him to follow. Finally, Billy stopped, panting. He looked around and realized he was completely alone. The cemetery, his parents, everything familiar was gone. The forest seemed darker now, the trees stretching upward, like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. That's when he saw the boy again, standing deathly still just a few feet away. "Come with me," the boy said, his voice flat and emotionless. "I'll take you to my house. We have lots of fun things to eat." Billy hesitated. Something wasn't right. The boy's face was pale, almost gray, and his smile stretched unnaturally wide. When Billy stepped closer, his stomach turned. The boy's eyes were lifeless, and patches of his face were rotting, exposing bone beneath. Billy tried to turn and run, but his legs wouldn't move. It felt like an invisible force was pulling him toward the boy. His surroundings began to blur, and the world spun as if he were falling into a nightmare. The lonely grave. Just as Billy felt himself slipping into darkness, A strong hand yanked him backward. His father's voice cut through the haze, yelling his name. Billy gasped and looked around. He was back at the edge of the woods, his parents staring at him in concern. "What the hell were you doing out there?" his father demanded. "Didn't I tell you to stay close?" Billy stammered, trying to explain about the boy in the woods. But his parents didn't see anyone. Instead, they noticed something else. A small neglected grave at the forest's edge. It was so overgrown it was almost hidden, but the inscription on the crumbling headstone was clear. "Here lies Johnny Harper, 1947 to 1954. Billy's father paled. "We need to leave. Now." The tragic story of Johnny Harper. Later that evening, Billy overheard his parents discussing the grave. His father shared the story he'd heard years ago about Johnny Harper, a local boy with a tragic past. Johnny had been the stepson of a cruel woman named Martha. After his mother's death, Johnny's father remarried, hoping to provide a stable home. But Martha was anything but kind. Behind closed doors, she beat Johnny and starved him, taking great care to keep her abuse hidden from the townsfolk. The boy bore it silently, never crying out, even when the punishments grew harsher. Neighbors occasionally smuggled food to him, but if Martha found out, she would unleash her wrath on the boy with even greater cruelty. One day, after a particularly brutal beating, Johnny died. The townsfolk only pieced the truth together when Martha, overcome with guilt, or perhaps fear of being discovered, threw herself into a well behind their home. The town buried Johnny in a lonely grave by the woods, forgotten by all but the wind and the trees. The haunting of Wildwood Hill. Billy couldn't shake the memory of Johnny's face, his hollow eyes, and decaying grin. That night, as he lay in bed, he swore he heard faint whispers coming from the woods outside the family's cabin. "Billy, come play." The next morning, his father found claw marks on the cabin door. That night, Billy couldn't sleep. The whispers were back, louder now. "Billy, come play." They drifted through the thin walls of the cabin like a cold breeze, chilling him to the bone. Every creak of the old wooden floorboards sounded like footsteps. Terrified, he squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the sounds. But then came a soft tapping on the window. He froze. Slowly, he pulled the blanket from his face and turned his head. Johnny was there. His face was pressed against the glass, pale and decayed, with hollow, lifeless eyes. His rotting lips twisted into a grotesque smile as he mouthed the words, "Come with me." Billy screamed, jolting his parents awake. They burst into his room just in time to see the silhouette of a small figure retreating into the woods, its laughter echoing through the night. His father grabbed a flashlight and stormed outside, but by the time he reached the edge of the forest, Johnny was gone. What he did find sent shivers down his spine, claw marks etched into the cabin wall, and footprints leading from Billy's window deep into the forest. The final confrontation, determined to put an end to the nightmare. Billy's father sought out an old local who was said to know the area's dark secrets. The man listened grimly to their story before nodding. "Johnny Harper," he said, "the lonely boy. His spirit's bound to the place. He doesn't just want playmates. He wants company forever. What do we do?" Billy's father asked. The man handed him a small pouch of salt and a worn leather journal. "Salt the grave and burn this. It's the only way to free his spirit." That night, armed with salt, torches, and courage, Billy and his parents returned to the cemetery. The forest seemed alive with shadows, and every rustle of leaves felt like a warning. They reached Johnny's lonely grave, its headstone bathed in moonlight. Billy's dad sprinkled the salt over the grave, while his mom lit the torch. But before they could ignite the journal, the air grew icy, and the whispers began again. "Don't leave me." The ground beneath them trembled, and Johnny emerged. His twisted form hovered above the grave, his decaying face now a mask of rage. "You promised to play," he screamed, lunging toward Billy. Billy's mom thrust the torch forward, the flames flaring brightly. Johnny recoiled, his shrieks filling the air. His father quickly tossed the journal onto the fire, and as it burned, Johnny's form wavered. The boy's expression softened, and for a fleeting moment, he looked like the scared, lonely child he once was. "I just wanted a friend," he whispered, before his form dissolved into ash and vanished with the wind. The Carters stood in stunned silence as the forest grew still. The grave was undisturbed, as if nothing had ever happened. Exhausted but relieved, they made their way back to the cabin, vowing never to return to Wildwood Hill. But even years later, Billy couldn't forget the boy's final words or the sadness in his hollow eyes. He often wondered if, in another life, they might have been friends. As for the grave, locals say no one dares go near it anymore. On quiet nights, some claim to hear laughter in the woods, a sound that drifts on the wind and fades with the sunrise. And Billy, every now and then, he dreams of a shadowy figure at the edge of the woods, waiting, smiling, whispering his name.